All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here today. My name is Kristen Klein. I'm going to be your host for today's webinar, Webinar versus Meetings, and just trying to kind of explain when you might want to use which platform for your event that you are hosting. I want to run through a few housekeeping items so that we can go ahead and get started and you guys know what to do on this event. So we are using our webinar platform for today's event. So you will notice as a participant in the platform, you aren't on video and you cannot mute or share audio. So as participants in a webinar, you are, again, cannot speak and we cannot see you. You are just in a listen-only type of mode, so only the panelists or a host like myself would be on video and audio and you can hear and see me and I'm able to share content in my screen. So a lot of what you're experiencing is actually what your attendees would experience when you're hosting a webinar. So that's just something to keep in mind. We are recording today's session and you will receive a link to that recording after the event is complete. So be on the lookout for that. We are also going to be taking your questions. So we'll do our very best to get to as many questions as possible. But if you do have a question, please go ahead and use that Q&A icon on the bottom of your toolbar. So you'll notice that on the bottom of your screen, there's that Q&A icon. Please go ahead and send in your questions and we'll do our very best, like I said, to answer as many as possible. The other thing I want to note is that we are using our live transcription feature. This is a feature that's actually in beta, so it's not available just yet. But this is something that I've turned on for the webinar, so hopefully we'll have this available on some of our accounts soon. But this isn't just yet available. If you wanted to do closed captioning, we do have that, and we do offer that through our app marketplace. It does require either a third-party service or someone on your team that you can designate to type in the closed captioning for you, but that is something that is available today, and you can check out more about that on our support site or look at the integrations and who we work with if you're interested in using closed captioning. All right, we're going to go ahead and kick things off here. So the agenda for today is we're just going to go ahead and talk through the difference between our meeting and webinar platform and really look at some of the feature set and highlight what differences there are so that you are aware when you're trying to decide what platform's right, what features you want to use might help make that decision really clear. We're also going to talk about use cases. So when might you use a meeting or a webinar and looking at what event use cases we've seen for both. We'll actually go into a little bit of the feature set and the experience for an attendee and a host using our meetings and webinar platform. We'll touch on some resources. So what do we have available that might be useful to you? And then we'll finally hit on Q&A. All right, so let's go ahead and just start talking about the difference between meeting versus webinar. So meetings are definitely best for when you're having private group discussions. You might have a large group, but you typically know those people or they're all internal to your organization. So meetings are something you invite colleagues to, customers, prospects, a group of people that you are familiar with. That is because anyone on a meeting can be on audio or video. Now you can decide if you can mute them and if they have the ability to get off mute, but you definitely have that interactivity on a meeting. So think about what that experience is like. Does everyone need to be on video? Do you want them to be able to speak and collaborate on a discussion that you're having? Those are the types of questions you want to ask, and that's definitely when you would want to use a meeting. When you want a lot of interactivity, everyone should be able to hear and see each other. We definitely want to make sure, though, that you are using the security features that we have in our platform to make sure your meetings are secure. So it's definitely important to make sure you're requiring a password for all the meetings that you're scheduling. And waiting rooms is a great idea. You can also schedule waiting rooms just for guests. So if you have an account, anyone who's joining your meeting who's not in your organization or on that same Zoom account, that same domain that you've set up with Zoom, they would maybe go to the waiting room as opposed to anyone internal just goes ahead and gets admitted into that meeting. You can also enable mute upon entry, and there's a lot of great security features. We're going to touch on some of those in a few slides with our upgrade to 5.0 that you all should be on since you're joining today. But definitely kind of those are the things you want to think about. With regard to webinars, webinars are great for when you're looking to host large audiences. So let's say you have a product announcement or you're hosting an event where you might know some of the people, but a lot of people you may not be familiar with. So these are for audiences that are unknown. Does it make sense to have them have the ability to get off mute so they can't speak. You really want to control some of the content and the presentation and what that experience is like for your attendees. So that's definitely a good use case for a webinar. You can also use webinars to drive social interaction or attendance or broaden your reach to unknown groups of people. So like I said, you could drive registration and post URLs with webinars. You could track where you're getting your registration, things like that. We've seen webinars used for a lot of different use cases, and we'll talk through some of them, but think of like maybe city council meetings, church services, concerts. These are great where you might have a huge audience, but maybe only a few people are actually going to speak. And again, the audience does have some interactivity. They can listen, they can ask questions, they see all the content you're sharing, and then there's polling as well. So we'll touch on more of that interactivity in a little bit. Here I just want to highlight quickly, what's the feature set for meeting versus webinar? So if you take a look, this is also going to help determine what you want to use just based on feature set. So the first thing I would highlight here, and I'm going to actually use my annotation feature, is that with our large meeting platform, the largest size event you can host is with 1,000 participants. So that's an easy decision. If you're looking to host a meeting or an event with more than 1,000 participants, you're definitely going to need to go on to Zoom Webinar. If you want more than that, that's where you need to go. If you have less than 1,000 participants on that large meeting, you can have everyone join that large meeting via Zoom. Registration is available on both our meeting and webinar platform, but I will caveat that registration is not available if you're using our meetings platform and you're on a free or a basic plan. So registration comes on paid plans. So if you're on pro or higher, you would have access to registration on meetings. Both of these services or these platforms can create reoccurring meetings or reoccurring webinars. So if you had a series of events you wanted to host and you wanted to schedule those settings and then just list out the different times, both platforms are capable of doing that. You do have the ability to use chat on both platforms as well. You'll notice that in our webinar platform today, I'm actually not using chat. So we have a large group of people on the webinar today, and chat sometimes can become really difficult to manage when you have these larger types of events. So it's preference only, but I typically turn off chat because I want most of my questions to be sent in through that Q&A panel, which is going to make it easier for me to manage. So just something to think through. That is a preference thing, but that is what we'd recommend. Polling. Polling is available on our large meeting and our webinar platform. And again, polling is another one of those features that if you have our basic meeting license, you would not have access to polling. So polling is only on our paid meeting licenses. So if you don't have that, that would be why. But polling is something that's available on both platforms. Reactions. So reactions is what you would find on our large meeting platform. That's that thumbs up, that clapping hands that you might see. That is something on meetings that you won't find on webinar. A few other kind of just highlights is if you wanted to do an event and you have a practice session, so typically what we do is we always enable practice session before our webinars. And that really gives our panelists, our hosts, a chance to sync before we broadcast and go live with the webinar content. So you'll find that ability on the webinar platform. Webinars have that practice session where you can meet privately and then you can decide to go live. So it's the same link, you just have a private session and then you go to a live webinar. Again, that is a great feature when you're hosting some events with multiple presenters. Q&A is also something you'll only find on webinar. We're using that today and we'll talk through that a little bit more. Breakout rooms. Breakout rooms is another feature that might be something you want to use for an event if you're doing a training or some type of internal or networking event. So if you are looking to use our breakout room feature, that is going to be something you need to use on meetings because we do not have that capability on webinar. And then finally, streaming capabilities. We'll talk through this more, but both on meetings and webinar, I will caveat again that meetings, if you want to stream, you need to be on a pro license. So if you're on a basic or free license, you won't have streaming capabilities. But if you wanted to host a meeting, maybe you just have your internal or the people you know attend on the Zoom platform, and then you could stream that meeting to Facebook, YouTube, or a custom stream and allow you to have a much larger audience. And that's capable with both meetings and webinars. All right, so let's talk through the attendee experience just to highlight the difference real quick here. So on our meetings platform, you would see the attendee experience look something like this. So we have a meeting here. We have everyone on video. Some people are muted, some are not, but you are going to be able to hear and see everyone. We can all collaborate. We can all share in discussion. There's much more flexibility. On meetings, each attendee has the ability to toggle kind of between speaker or gallery views, so they can select their view, they can see content. If you allow them, they might be able to share screen or annotate. So a much more collaborative environment. You'll notice on our webinar platform, again, which is what you're experiencing, this is a sample as well. You'll see the host might have their video here, and then you would see content right here. So you have the ability to show video content for that host and speaker. They can dictate what is being shown, but as an attendee, I am not seeing. So this is the view I'm seeing. So let's talk about when customers might want to use Zoom meetings to host an event. So there's all types of different use cases. Here's just a few. So our meetings platform is great for sales demos or sales discussions, like I said, with prospects or customers. Office hour type of content for if you're a teacher or you're a professor and you're hosting office hours, you want your students to be able to come in and ask you any questions. Meetings is a great platform for that. Solution demos, team meetings. So if you have a team, you want to make sure you're meeting, everyone's kind of working remote still, or maybe it's a hybrid where people are in the office and some are going to be working remote as we all go back to work. That might be great for our meeting platform versus webinar because everyone in your team might be able to have the opportunity to speak. All hands meetings, if you have under 1,000 participants, would work well on meetings. Staff meetings, product demos, happy hours if you're thinking more for social events, classes, all those different types of use cases. So let's talk a little bit about sales and product demos. So you'd see here a great thing when you're selling over a video conferencing platform over online or on video is the ability to still see the interaction and the reaction and body language from that customer or prospect you're selling to. So that ability to get their cues, their social cues, maybe you're discussing something, they had an expression, maybe they looked confused or they had a question they wanted to interrupt. It's great to have those social cues, which is why it's nice to have them on video so that you can't fully replicate that on in-person experience, but with video, you can get a lot of that same feedback that you might be missing from being in person. Like I mentioned, virtual classrooms, office hours. So we have a lot of teachers and professors using Zoom to teach their classes. So it's great for meetings. You can dictate what permissions you give your attendees, but this will also allow them to raise their hand and ask a question. You can go ahead and make sure, again, that you're seeing all your students' faces, that they're understanding the concepts. They can see each other. It gives that connection. So that's really a great use case for our meetings platform. And then workout and fitness classes. So some of you might be running a gym or a business or workout business, yoga studio. You can definitely use our meetings product for those use cases. What I would recommend is, you start up your meeting, maybe you have a workout business and you have people who subscribe to your gym or your fitness class. You might want to, since you know them, let them into that Zoom experience. You can all do the class together. Everyone could be on video, so you could take a look at their position or their poses if you're doing yoga or any type of other exercise. See how they're doing, coach them through it. They could see each other. It gives them that kind of synergy of working out together. But if you wanted to extend that, like I said, to people that you don't know, maybe share some of your workout tips or your business best practices, you would go ahead and I would recommend you stream that to a platform such as Facebook or a social media platform rather than posting your meeting ID. Your meeting ID is really secure and sacred, and you don't want people who aren't invited to be able to join your meetings. So that's why I would recommend when audiences you want or you don't know want to be included, I would stream that content out and promote that on your social media channels for your business in order to get that audience. Another great use case for meetings, we've seen a lot of fun use cases. Some people are getting married over Zoom, attending happy hours like I mentioned, just connecting, maybe having a weekly call with a relative or a family members who aren't able to see each other. That's also a wonderful use case for Zoom where you, again, have that face-to-face time. So just highlights on our meeting product. So you have the ability to kind of share with up to 1,000 video participants. You can actually go ahead and show gallery view with 49 people on one screen if you have that enabled in your settings. and that again gets you just all those videos on one screen. You have the ability to use virtual backgrounds, so I'm actually using one in this webinar today, but you have the ability to share a virtual background, hide anything that's going on behind you. It's a great use case for that. We offer local and cloud recordings depending on your subscription level. You are able to share your screen and any content, so whiteboarding or PowerPoint slides, videos, all different kinds of content. We have breakout rooms, polling, and chat, and then you have the ability to play audio and video if you wanted to do that. So just some quick highlights. I'll let you read these later. And then this is just the Zoom meeting kind of controls. So as the host of a Zoom meeting, I just want to touch on a few of the controls here. So down here in the meeting platform on your bottom left-hand corner, you're going to see that microphone icon where you can decide to mute and unmute your audio. And if I click that up arrow, I would have the option to select which microphone and speaker I have that I want to use. I can also test my setup beforehand or in meeting if I'm having any issues with audio and video. And then again, that video icon right here, again, I can turn my video on or off. Hopefully you have that turned on if you're in a meeting. And then again, selecting which camera feed you want to use. And then if you haven't set your virtual background, you could actually do so right here. If you wanted to end the meeting, this is where you would find that feature. And then these are all the different icons down here on your toolbar that you'd have access to. You would also have access in this top corner. This is actually a shield now rather than a lock because we are on GCM encryption with our 5.0 release. But you would see, if you click the eye icon, you could see all the meeting details. So your ID, the name, and kind of that URL if you need to invite anyone else to join. And then here is where you can toggle between gallery view and speaker view. So here we're looking at speaker view in a meeting. That person who's speaking, so Kit, he's speaking, his image, his video is larger. Everyone else is in that thumbnail strip at the top of the screen that you can scroll through if you have more than 3 or 4 participants. And again, here's what that gallery view looks like. So this is not as many as 49, but if you wanted, you could have up to 49 images or videos listed on this screen, and you can see everyone at once. And then some of the security features that we rolled out for meetings to be aware of. So we've talked about a few, but you'll notice as the host or co-host of a meeting, you have that security shield on your desktop. And this is where we've consolidated all our security features. So we still have them listed in a few other tabs or icons on their toolbar, but this is a great way to get all those features in one spot. So here I can lock a meeting. So once I have everyone who's able or should be joining, I can go ahead and lock that meeting so no one else is able to attend. I can turn on waiting room if I didn't set that up when I was scheduling my meeting, which is another great feature. Again, I can go ahead and see who's in the waiting room before I let them into that meeting. You can also dictate what you allow your participants to do. So whether they can share their screen, they could chat, if they can rename themselves or annotate when you're sharing content. All things you can turn on and off as the host. You have the ability to remove a participant. So if you have anyone who's been in your meeting that's maybe acting disrespectful or you need to remove them, maybe you're talking on a different topic and you want them to go ahead and exit, you can remove that participant from your meeting right here. You can also report a user. So if you're hosting an event or you're hosting a meeting and there's someone who needs to be reported to Zoom, you can go ahead and click this and there'll be a window that pops up and asks you for some information about the person you're reporting. And then our trust and safety team will actually go ahead and take a look at that report and do any or follow up and kind of figure out any behavior or what the next steps should be for that. All right, so inviting participants in your meeting. So if you click on that participants icon down here, you actually have the ability to invite participants into your meeting. So you can do that through your contacts. If you have a lot of shared people in your company on Zoom, you would find them in your contacts here. You can also invite though a room system, so a Zoom room or a conference room. You could invite via email or by phone. So all these options are available. You can also copy the URL, and if you had an email tool that you wanted to quickly use, just send an email with the link to join your meeting. And then again, in Participants tab, I just want to go ahead, I went too fast there. If you have your waiting room turned on, which hopefully you guys are using, when you have that, you'll have this participants icon go ahead and kind of highlight orange, and it'll give you a notification to let you know that you have people in your waiting room. And if I wanted to see those people and let them in, I can click See Waiting Room, and it'll show me all the participants who are actually in that waiting room. And I can decide if I would like to remove them from the waiting room or I can admit them to the meeting. Now I can go ahead and admit each individual one by one, or I could admit all. So if Remy, Henry, and Sarah are all invited and those are the people I'm expecting, I could admit them all, which makes it real fast to let them in. You also could send a message to anyone in the waiting room. Now, this is a one universal message. It's not specifically to one person, so just keep that in mind when you are sending that message. Once I go ahead and I let them into my meeting, you are still in the participants window. You would see everyone who's in the meeting, and then there's some other icons and things they can do. So they can give you a thumbs up, clapped hands, different icons that you'll see next to their names if they're using those. If I wanted to scroll over someone's name in particular, I can actually give them more controls in my meeting. So if you're hosting an event or a meeting and you maybe want to assign a co-host, which is someone who has the capability to use a lot of the features that the host has, you can do that if you're on a paid account. You can make someone else the host. You can make someone a co-host. I could actually chat Vincent and start his video or stop his video. I could highlight his video or spotlight, his video if I wanted that to be the video people are seeing. I can also unmute him. So these are all things when I hover over his name, I have more control over. And you'll see like removing them is also something we saw on that security icon. If I click down here on this More button, you also have some universal features that would apply to all your participants in the meeting. So things like muting everyone as they enter or allowing them to unmute themselves. You'll find those different toggles or those permissions right here, which again, you can go ahead and dictate. In-meeting chat. So I just want to touch on chat is available in meeting. We've talked a little bit about this. As the host, you can dictate who people are able to chat with. So whether they can chat with everyone publicly and privately, maybe just everyone publicly, the host only, or no one. So you can toggle and check which one you want to use. And then in the chat window, I as the host have the ability to chat with anyone who's on my meeting. I can chat privately, or I can go ahead and say I want to send a message to everyone. So maybe I'm sharing a link or my PowerPoint slides. Whatever you want to do, you have the ability to send those messages. And again, just a view of what the attendee experiences when they're in the waiting room for your meeting. So they'll just see a notification or a message here that the host is going to let them in. And then from the host view perspective, you're getting that notification down here on that participants icon. You can go ahead and open that waiting room list, and it'll show you who's in your waiting room that you can let into that meeting. Sharing your screen. So I just want to touch on the sharing screen works the same way for both meetings and webinars. So when you're in a meeting and you're hosting something, if you want to share content, you go ahead and click that share screen icon, and any window you have open on your computer is going to appear in this window. So I could share my entire desktop. I could share a whiteboard, and we can annotate and collaborate on a whiteboard. I could go ahead and share PowerPoint slides specifically. So rather than sharing everything on my desktop, I just want to share that application. I could share a browser window. I could also share a video. Now, if you are going to share a video when you're using our meetings or webinar platform, it is really key that you click on Share Computer Sound Only, or not only, click Share Computer Sound. That's going to make sure that the audio that's playing on that video is going to be shared with your participants in that meeting. So it's really important you do that. And if you are going to go full screen with that video clip, just be sure to optimize that so that it's the best experience for your attendees. Once you've selected your window, you just go ahead and click Share. But again, you can go to the Advanced tab. If you wanted to just share a portion of your screen, you could do that, and anything outside of that box would not be shared. You could share computer sound only. So if you wanted to play music for anything you're doing, you have that capability. And again, just go ahead and click Share Computer Sound down here when you're doing that. And then you can also share files. So if you're looking to share from Dropbox or Microsoft OneDrive, any of those file sharing different collaborations, you can go ahead and select that and share files from there. Now, when I am sharing content, you would notice that as the host, my toolbar goes up to the top, and you have the capability for all those different icons. This More area right here will have a list of everything else you can dictate in and take advantage of. If you are allowing people to annotate when you're sharing screen or on a whiteboard, something that might be useful to you if you're hosting a training event is if you wanted to see how everyone's responding when they're annotating, you could click show names of annotators so you can see who's annotating and saying what when you're allowing that to take place. You can also at any time disable that attendee annotation. And then again, you can use our spotlight feature or symbols, and you could use in drawing, you could use text, you could use different colors, you can save, you can edit, all those great things here. And then lastly, for recordings for meetings, you can record locally or to the cloud. So that's something, again, to keep in mind depending on what plan you have. If you're on our basic plan, you can only record locally, which means you're recording to your computer, your device. If you have the capability for cloud recording, I would recommend you go in and take a look at those settings because you want to make sure you're recording the different views you want to take advantage of. So if you want to record gallery view and speaker view and then decide what you want to use later, you want to make sure you're including that when you're recording to the cloud. But you can start, stop, and pause recording. You can also set it up to start recording automatically when you're scheduling those meetings. All right, let's go ahead and touch on when people might use webinar. So webinars are great for town hall meetings. They might be great for user groups or customer briefings or analyst briefings, road shows, sales kickoffs, compliance training. You could look at any kind of training, external or internal training. Maybe it's announcements. Maybe you have a new product or feature you're announcing and you want to do a demo and make sure everyone's aware. All hands meetings, again, you have those larger companies are using all hands or the webinar platform for their all hands meetings, stay connected, communicate with all their employees based on wherever they're working. Great for keynotes. So here you can see company-wide all hands meetings. This is just a sample of that. And actually what I want to do here is I'm going to go ahead and just set up a poll here. I'd love to get maybe some feedback from you guys, and this will also just show you the experience for the polling. So here's a poll that might be helpful when you're thinking about what event you're going to be hosting and where you're joining from today. Like, what are you looking to use this platform for? Is it going to be for a meeting with your internal team? Are you looking at webinar? What kind of products are you interested in learning about? You can ask multiple questions. So this poll in particular actually has a number of questions. So I can ask more than one question at a time. I can decide whether each question you can answer one response or if you could have multiple responses. So this is great for all hands meetings or a bunch of different events. Maybe you want to poll your employees and get their engagement or feedback on how they're doing, what they want to hear back from you. This is something that you can use in your meetings, which is really helpful. And you can decide, again, you can pre-set up these polls with any questions that you want to ask. Give me a few more minutes here and then I'll shut the poll just so you can see the experience. But this is something that you can use. It's really helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and end polling. I could go ahead and share those results. So if I wanted, I could share the results with the attendees and they could scroll through and see where everyone was listed here in this webinar. So you can go ahead and see this polling right here. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. But that's just one way to kind of get interactivity in your webinars, depending on your audience and what you want to ask. But all hands meetings, great when you have participants or a number of panelists who want to speak. You can share content. Maybe have some people in a room, maybe not right now, but in the future. And then you have people joining online. This is a great use case for that. So when we talk about webinar, product announcements and keynotes are really key. So every year we host our Zoomtopia conference, which is our user conference that we host annually. And we use our webinar platform to actually go ahead and broadcast out the content that we have at that event so that anyone who's online can join. So you can use production, you can use production team with webinar to give you high quality video. They can put kind of designs and graphics together based on what you're sharing in that webinar screen. So this is an example of that, but this is a great tool when you have those large announcements or keynotes. And then another event that we did actually in the beginning of March is we hosted an online analyst day and a customer advisory board. So if you wanted to get feedback from a small group of an analyst community or your customers, you might want to host a webinar and then actually allow others to join that and hear feedback from them. So this particular event they were hosting with analysts, they had them give their insights for the industry, what was happening. We thought that might be useful to our customers or prospects or anyone else who might find that topic interesting. So we wanted to host them and have that piece as a webinar. Now they did an all-day event, so they were switching actually between meetings and webinars depending on what they were doing and what the group size was. But we actually go in ahead and you can make your events kind of do your best to replicate that experience, that connection. So we actually sent everyone on the event, all the analysts, some lunch. So we gave them a gift card so that they could order a lunch. And then during the day, we had a lunch break where everyone had their lunch and they had a conversation and still had that connection that they were missing from being in person, but allowing that time and that space during your event or your agenda to have more of that networking, kind of getting to know you type of a session. So you can definitely do that with our meetings platform and then splice in when you might want to have a webinar throughout the day. And then if you're looking to host large kind of type of events, think of graduations or large ceremonies, webinar is a great option where you're obviously going to want to invite multiple or a large group of people. Maybe people want their families to attend. How do you make sure that you're making that secure and that only the people who are invited to attend can? I would recommend webinars so that you can control content and you don't have to worry about people being on video or audio. Maybe ask all your graduates or everyone as part of that award ceremony, put together a slide, maybe it has their image, maybe it talks about what they're graduating from or with, just maybe some key facts, and you can cycle through that as you read everyone's name so that they still get that recognition, or maybe it's a scrolling list of names that you want to do. You can get really creative with what that looks like. So some key things for when you're hosting webinars. So definitely our best practices are really schedule that dry run. So before you go ahead and start to kick off an event on webinar, we do recommend you have a dry run with your panelists. That way you can work out who's going to be sharing content when you're switching between presenters, who's answering questions, and how you're going to take questions. You can look at your audio, video, and your connection, make sure that looks good. So our other kind of recommendation is do your best to have a hardwired internet connection so that you have the best internet possible when you're hosting an event. Test your audio and video before the webinar, so making sure again that you're using the audio and video that you want that connection so that you have the best experience. Enable that practice session for the panelists and hosts to join so you can go ahead and sync before you go live. Do your best to minimize any background noise. So again, just making sure that you're in a quiet environment, that you have that option. Go ahead and dress to impress. So depending on what your video looks like, you want to make sure you're looking professional. So just be sure that you are thinking about what your appearance looks like. That's going to give you more authority when you're hosting an event, and make sure that you are looking professional. Do your best to set proper expectations. So when I kicked off the event, I ran through those housekeeping items with everyone on the call. So you knew where to go ahead and submit your questions, that we were recording. Any other housekeeping items might be relevant that you want to set those standards out. I would highly recommend you do that up front. And then do your very best to start on time so everyone is kind of ready once that time starts and you're going and you're not wasting any time. This is just an example of that practice session. So when you are in a webinar and you're in the practice session, you would see all the panelists here. At the top of your screen here in this orange bar, it's telling you that you're in practice mode, and then you go ahead and click broadcast to go live. So this is what that experience looks like. We're just in this intimate setting and then we go live. Now let's talk about engaging and interacting. So how do we get engagement on large type of meetings? So like I said, you're sharing content, maybe sharing video, getting them engaged with the demo. Those are all great ways to engage your audience. Using Q&A, so maybe you have a few panelists in the background answering questions for you. Maybe you're taking questions at the end. Think of how you want to get questions and feedback from your attendees. Polling. So you saw what polling looks like. You can actually set up the poll before your event, which is what I would recommend, just making it easier on yourself. But if you forget to set up a poll, you do have the ability to do that on the fly, meaning you can click on that icon and you can set up a poll in real time when you're hosting your event, if you wanted to do that. Otherwise, you can, when you're scheduling a webinar or meeting, in the bottom of that screen, there is a polling tab, and you can go ahead and pre-create those polls. Chat. So deciding when you want to use chat and how you use that is something you can use for interaction. You also have the raise hand feature if you wanted to allow people to respond by raising their hand, and if you wanted to see everyone's interaction with that, you do have that capability. And then just get feedback, solicit feedback. So with our webinar platform, you can actually insert a link to a survey that you would find at the end of the webinar so that you get feedback on how the host was, how the content was. You would use any other survey tool that you would like. So it's not a survey tool that Zoom has, it's one that you could use. So maybe Qualtrics Survey or SurveyMonkey, whatever survey tool you have, you would just need that link and you could put that and get feedback so that when people exit or leave your event, your webinar, they would get that survey and could give you that feedback. Streaming. So like I mentioned, you can stream to multiple platforms. So you do want to just make sure you have that set up ahead of time, but you can, if you wanted to stream to multiple platforms, you would use our custom streaming service, and you might want to use something like a Restream or StreamSpot. Those have capabilities to stream, for instance, to maybe Facebook and YouTube at the same time. Otherwise, with Zoom, you just go ahead and you would stream to either platform that you would choose. Our integrations. So we offer a lot of integrations in our app marketplace. So if you haven't gone ahead and gone to that, I would highly suggest you do that. You'll see marketing automation integrations with Marketo or Salesforce, HubSpot, a lot of great email and marketing tools. You'd also find some integrations if you're looking to charge for your events. So with our Zoom webinar platform, we have a native integration with PayPal, but you would also find this integration through a company called Zapier. They create zaps or connections between different products. So some of those might include Eventbrite with Zapier and Zoom, or Cvent, which is another platform where you can create maybe a bigger landing page experience for your event. You can also charge through these platforms as well. So different ways to monetize your event if that's something you're looking to do. Reporting. So if you're on, depending on what platform you have, like I said, if you're on a paid platform, you have access to reporting. But if you click into zoom.us, you log into your account and you click on that reports tab, you would have access to figure out usage reporting and reporting data for your meeting or your webinar. And here you could go ahead and select for webinar specifically. This is where you would see registration reports, attendee reports, performance reports, Q&A, or polling if you're using that. So these are all the different reports you'd have access to. And then again, you would just toggle between date range and you could go ahead and download the specific report you're looking for. So just another reminder, meetings versus webinars. When you're thinking meetings, those are really great when you have a really collaborative audience. You want everyone to be on audio or video. You want to go ahead and have more interactivity. Everyone can get on and speak. They can collaborate. It's everyone you know is on that meeting, or at least a large internal group. You don't invite anyone via posting your link on social. That is definitely not what you want to do with either the meeting platform. You want to make sure your meetings are really secure so that you're only inviting those you know. Webinar is great for those larger audiences where you want to go ahead and have everyone in a listen-only mode where you're sharing content, you're dictating who can share screen and who's on video. So just, again, just a recap to think through when you might want to use which platform. And then finally, I just want to touch on a few resources that you do have access to. So we have an ebook around running engaging online events that might be really helpful if you're looking to do more events online. I'd highly encourage you to take a look at this, and we can put some of these links into our chat. So let me just pause actually to do that in your case. If you're interested in looking at any of these links, these are great. So we have tips on how to broadcast or use Zoom for a broadcast. So that's definitely something I would recommend. We also have webinar host best practices. So if you are going to be hosting an event on webinar and you want to know some best practices, take a look at that resource there. And I just put these all into chat, so you can go ahead and take a look at these. Webinar events, so we do offer webinars and events daily. So if you're looking for other training specifically in more detail on either meetings or webinar, we do offer those. And you can go ahead and find a list of those here. But a lot of people have been asking us about hosting choirs or music performances on Zoom. So I just wanted to share a blog that we had written about one of those performances if that's something you're looking to do. And then it's really important, as I mentioned, to make sure your meeting is a secure experience. And we've talked about some of those best practices, but this blog here summarizes a lot of those. And if you haven't subscribed or checked out our blog, I would encourage you to do that. We have a lot of great information and resources there. We're constantly updating that with new information. So it's a great area to get additional help. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here, and I'm going to go ahead and take a look at Q&A. So I think we had a few questions on just some clarifying things. So I want to go ahead and just talk through a few things. So as I was sharing my screen, I had that red dot. I was actually clicking the annotation option and using that spotlight feature. So that is something that you can use on when you're sharing screen. You can click into annotate and spotlight, and that's just going to highlight where you want people to focus when you're sharing content, which is a great feature to have. For sharing video and making sure you ensure good quality, that's a question that comes up a lot. I would highly recommend that you do your best to have a great internet connection and secure or wired internet connection to make sure that there's no gaps in your Wi-Fi if you're using Wi-Fi. You would definitely want to take a look at making sure you're sharing computer audio and then have that video open on your desktop so it's easily accessible. There's a question around polling. So polling is a paid option, yes. So if you are on our Zoom basic account or a free account, you do not have access to polling. That isn't a feature that you would see that you have access to. So if you want to use polling, you would need to upgrade to Pro. And then webinar. So we talked about the difference between meetings and webinar. Webinar is actually an additional license, so it's a different product. You would just need to get a license for webinar if you wanted to use that tool. And you can go ahead and purchase that online, or you could reach out to a sales rep to help you do that if you needed to get that license. All right, let's see here. What other questions do we have coming in? So is it possible to share a PowerPoint slide plus computer sound at the same time? So what you can do, you can only share, I think, one at a time. You could probably, because you do a new share. I don't know that you could play music. You could try it out. I don't know that would work very well because it's just going to be muffled in the background. But you would basically be sharing one thing at a time. You could embed like a video or audio into your PowerPoint slide, which is something that you might find useful. So great question from Kim. If you're recording a meeting and you're using breakout rooms, will it also record the breakout rooms? So when you go into breakout rooms, you aren't actually going to record in there unless you have someone with the capability to do that. So you might assign a co-host to go into each breakout room, and then they could record and send you those files. But when you're recording a meeting and you go into breakout rooms, those breakouts are not recorded. Let's see. So can we have a view of different panelists on the screen here in the webinar? So Maria, what you can do is you dictate what you want to share with your attendees. So if you have multiple panelists on video, you could share that gallery type of view with everyone on video, and anyone who you didn't want shown, I would just have them turn off their video and they wouldn't show up. You could also do speaker view. So whoever's speaking would be the person that you're showing. So it's just going to depend on what view you want to share. Question about if you have to have a paid account to have a co-host or host. So as a host, if you wanted to assign the co-host role, you do have to be on a paid account. So if you wanted to use that, that is something that you, as the host, have to be on a paid account. Now, when I assign the co-host role, someone else who's attending my meeting, if they don't have to be on a paid account. So if I had Joe, he's in my meeting, he doesn't have to be on a paid account to be assigned the co-host role, but I, as the host, do have to be on a paid account in order to do that, to have that option. Let's see. I'm seeing a lot of questions, or a few questions come in about whether we're going to have Italian as a language with Zoom. And I just want to say that I know that is something that our team is working on. So I don't have a date yet. I know that is something that they're looking into. So hopefully we'll have more information on that for you soon. Let's see. So is there a limitation on the amount of panelists you can have on a Zoom webinar? Great question. So with our webinar license, if you have a webinar license of less than 500, you have 100 panelists that are possible. And do keep in mind that your panelists count toward that total attendee number. So if you're on a webinar 100 license, you can have up to 100 panelists, and each panelist you have is counting as attendees. So if you have 10 panelists, then you can only have 90 attendees, if that makes sense. Now, if you're on a webinar license of 500 and above, you have the ability to have up to 300 panelists. And again, just remember, anyone who's a panelist in a webinar has the ability to unmute themselves, they can share video, they can share content. They can see Q&A, things like that. But that is the limitation of how many panelists you can have on each webinar platform. Let's see. So great question about bandwidth requirements for webinar. Is it the same for meetings? So yes, it's the same. The more attendees require higher bandwidth. No, it does not. So it's the same bandwidth requirements to join a webinar as it is to join a meeting. Let's see. So breakout rooms, there's a few questions I think on breakout rooms. So one thing I do want to point out is breakout rooms are on any of our meeting accounts. So if you are on a free account or a paid account, you do have access to breakout rooms. If you are not seeing that icon, it's because it's not enabled. So it's really important you log into zoom.us, log into your account, and go into your settings section. And if you go under meeting advanced, one of the top items is to enable breakout rooms. So if you did want to use that feature, you just need to go ahead and turn on that breakout room capability so that you can use that feature. So if you're not seeing that, it's just because that feature isn't defaulted to be turned on as standard. Like, it's a feature available, but we just don't have it turned on. So if you wanted to use it, go ahead and go in your settings and turn that on. And then as that, we didn't touch too much on breakout rooms, but breakout rooms, you can, as the host, you can preset those up, or you can set up breakout rooms when you're actually in a meeting and you dictate as the host, you name how many breakout rooms you want, and then you can put attendees in a breakout room. You can also, once you put everyone into the breakout room, you can hop between breakout rooms and see what discussions are happening. So that's kind of in a nutshell how those work, but we do have a lot of great resources on our support site. So if you aren't aware or you haven't used them before, I'd highly encourage you to go to zoom.us/support and just type in breakout room in the search window. And it's going to give you all the prerequisites. It's going to have a lot of screenshots and video information. You can get a lot of great information about how to use breakout rooms. There's also a great idea just for everyone on this call. If you haven't hosted a meeting or you're getting ready to host a big event, log into the meeting platform, log into the webinar platform, start a practice one or a dummy meeting or webinar. Invite a few colleagues or friends or anyone in your house to join so you can practice using some of these sessions. Test out breakout rooms, test out polling, see how it feels. Make sure you get comfortable. That way, when you are ready to host your meeting or your webinar, you have that comfort level because you've experienced and tested those settings. There's no harm in setting up a dummy meeting or a dummy webinar so that you can practice. Let's see. So great question I think I saw here. Someone was asking if it's possible to turn off that ding when someone joins your meeting. Yes, it is. So that is something in your settings that you can turn off. There's actually on the participants tab or that icon in the more button, it'll say play sound when someone joins or leaves. You can disable that if you did want to do that. Let's see. Again, a lot of questions on how to prepare the polling in advance. So I would definitely have you take a look. Again, go ahead and schedule a meeting and test that out. You would go ahead and, let me see if I can just share my screen real quick here. I'm going to exit out of my PowerPoint. It'll let me, okay. So I just want to go here. If I wanted to schedule a meeting, I could go in here, and this is actually my account. So I could go in, I could schedule from here. So if I went into meetings, I could schedule a new meeting. So let's just say this is my meeting details. I like how this is. You might want to pay more attention. Maybe I want to go ahead and enable that waiting room. That's great. I'll click save. Now, if I scroll down, I don't have polls yet, but I could add a poll here. So here is where I could go ahead and set that up. So I can title the poll. So if I'm creating multiple, it might be nice to have a title so I know which poll I want to launch when. You can type in your question, then you would type in your answers. You can select from multiple choice or single choice, depending on what you want to allow the attendees to answer. And then you could go ahead and save that question or that poll. And that's going to be something you'd see when you launch. So So this is how you would set up that poll ahead of time. Even if you're in meeting and you want to go ahead and create that poll on the fly, it'll take you into your account to do this same process. So this is how you would set up a poll. All right, we're almost out of time. I just want to see if there's any last final questions that I can answer for you all. Let's see. Just a lot of questions around reporting and breakout rooms. So again, I would just highly encourage you to go ahead and search or log into your account, play around with the settings, take a look at what you have access to. So if you're hosting a meeting that you don't see reporting, you should go click on that reporting tab. If you don't have that, you're probably on a basic account which doesn't have reporting. So if you need that feature, you're going to need to upgrade to our pro account. So just go ahead and take a look. Like I said, play around with the settings. What do you have turned on? What do you have turned off? If you're not seeing polling, but you're on a paid account, go make sure your polling feature is turned on in your settings. So let me just bring that up real quick. So if I'm logged into my account here and I go to my settings, so over here, I can take a look and see all the different feature functionality I have turned on or off. So you're going to see these things listed here. And I can toggle them to be turned on or I can turn them off. So requiring a password, things like that. If you want to mute people on entry, you can do that on a per meeting basis, or you could do that as a universal setting. If I wanted to allow chat, private chat, file transfer, if that's something, co-host. So if you have that capability, polling right here. If you don't see polling, but you're on that paid account, make sure you have polling enabled. So it's really important that you go and log in and take a look at all the settings you have and what's turned on so that you know what you have the option to use. Here's where you'd go ahead and turn on breakout rooms if you wanted to use those. So like I said, this is defaulted to be off, so just make sure you have that turned on if that's something you want to use. So here's where you can see all these settings. I'd highly encourage you to go ahead and take a look at these. Just get familiar so that you understand what you have feature functionality-wise. Let's see. I definitely would say that there's a lot of great questions here. I know we haven't gotten to them all. One thing to also keep in mind, we didn't touch on this, but when you are hosting or using, going to host a meeting or a webinar, you can definitely go ahead and take a look at your audio and your video, make sure that sounds good. If you can, use a wired headset, but otherwise just use whatever headset you're comfortable with. If it sounds good, use it. So if you have those wireless pods or you have a wireless headset, and you're comfortable, that's great. Go ahead and I would say use that because that's going to make you feel comfortable when you're presenting. I'm seeing a lot of questions on the live transcription, and I'll touch on that, Andy. This is actually a feature in beta. I mentioned that at the top of the hour. So this is something that we have in beta we've been using just to get familiar and make sure it works before we roll this feature out to our customers. So we will be working on getting this rolled out, but it's not available just yet. Be on the lookout for that. This is using AI to do the transcription. Now, if you wanted to do closed captioning, we do have that capability right now. You don't need to wait for that. If you have the plan that supports that, you just need to assign someone to type in that content, and then they can go ahead and type in those closed captions. We also have an integration in our app marketplace with third parties that do that sort of service. If that is something that you need for an event that you're hosting, go ahead and take a look. But hopefully that answers your question. The transcription feature is in beta. It's not available just yet. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you found this content helpful. Be on the lookout for the link to recording, and we do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.